Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to do a book review on the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's a leadership book. I read this a few years ago and decided to do a review on it. I think it'll be helpful to you. The book is broken down into 3 sections, and each section is like a military terminology or like a military way of saying a leadership principle. So the first section is winning the war within, and Jocko Willink just defines what extreme ownership is, the title of the book. He says, on any team, in any organization, all responsibility for success and failure rests with the leader. He says that the leader has to own everything in his or her own world, and if something goes wrong, it's your fault. And if something goes right, you get the credit. Essentially, you need to take responsibility for everything that happens. And he says there's nobody else to blame except you if something goes wrong. And as a spiritual leader, that's probably something that I don't necessarily agree with in every circumstance, because you can be a leader, but you're not going to control people. I think that if this statement was completely true, that everything goes well or goes poorly because of the leader, I think that that takes away an individual's willpower. But it is good to take responsibility for your job, whatever that is. Obviously, the Navy SEAL is a little different than ministry. But he says that the leader must always acknowledge his mistakes or failures, take ownership, and develop a plan. Great principles there. And he uses an illustration to describe leadership. You maybe have heard this before. It's kind of popular, but he talks about 2 boat crews. During the Navy SEALs Hell Week, they had several boat crews, and these guys, and they would basically carry the boats above their head, and they would do different exercises. And he says that one of the crews was winning over and over and over again, and another one of the crews was losing, and all they did was switch the leaders. Then the group that was losing all the time started beating all the other groups, and the previous group that was winning before started taking second place all the time. And so it's a cool illustration how one person who takes ownership and leads their group does so much better, performs way better. Another principle in this first section is he talks about believing. And if you're going to lead an organization, you're going to lead in any capacity, you have to first believe something is true before you're able to lead other people. And deeply rooted belief is often the source of someone being very passionate about what they do. You're not going to see someone who's really passionate and that passion be authentic if they don't truly believe the message that they're talking about. That's a great leadership principle there. He says that people will ask on teams, is it worth it? And if you're leading the team and you haven't settled that question already, then the people behind you aren't going to have settled that either. Or they will, but it's not because of you. You're not leading them in that principle. You need to make sure that you truly believe in what you do, and if not, then change what you do so that you really believe in it. The last part of this first section is the idea of ego. He says that if you don't check your ego, then it clouds and disrupts everything. So if a leader thinks that they're just a self-made individual and they're all that in the bag of chips, then that'll obviously hinder the way that people follow them. And a couple of principles he lists are being able to take constructive criticism. That's a good thing to ask yourself. If someone comes to you and offers you constructive criticism, can you listen? Or do you instantly start going on defense and defending why you do what you do? And another point that he mentions is that often the most difficult ego to deal with is your own. Great principles here for the first section of the leadership. The second section is titled Laws of Combat, and the first part discusses teamwork. It's titled Cover and Move. But he says that teamwork is the most fundamental tactic and perhaps the only tactic, and that if you don't work as a team, you're not going to be able to accomplish what you're supposed to. And that sounds kind of obvious, but the next part, he discusses how if you're not simple in the way that you lead, then you're not leading clearly. And I've seen this before. I read a book a little while ago about churches and how they're supposed to operate. And every illustration I felt completely overcomplicated what the Bible says the church is supposed to be. You have to keep it simple. If you're going to lead, obviously you as the leader know very intricate details, but whenever you're leading, you have to keep the big vision simple. And he also discusses prioritizing and executing. He says when problems compound in a snowball, everything becomes more complex, and the leader has to remain calm and make the best decisions possible. This is really cool because he says, like, if you're in a stressful situation, relax, look around, make a decision. So again, using that the simplify concept, don't make things overcomplicated. make a decision, and then you're going to make good decisions and bad decisions, but then you have to move on. The last thing he mentions about teamwork is you have to decentralize command. You can't lead 20 people and have all of them answer to you. You have to break down into different teams, because as humans, you can only manage, he says, 6 to 10 people. And that reminds me of the way Jesus led. He led 12, and then those 12 led others. You have to break things down past just you leading a massive team. The last part of this third section is that discipline equals freedom. He defines this as the dichotomy of leadership, because you think that as you get more freedom, that the discipline is the opposite thing, and so they're not related, but they are. If you are diligent Monday through Friday, you don't have to worry about working on Saturday and Sunday. And a lot of people want freedom, but the way that you get freedom in anything is a lot of work. You'll see people start businesses. That takes a lot of work on the front end, but over time that produces freedom to do what you want to with your time. And the same if you get really good at a certain skill, well, eventually you can probably lead other people and manage so that you don't necessarily have to be doing the skill all day long. Now, the problems are going to be harder that you have to solve rather than maybe getting paid an hourly wage to do a simple task. But then when you manage people, it becomes more difficult. But you have certain freedoms because you discipline yourself in another area. Discipline equals freedom. That's the dichotomy of leadership. Today, we've discussed Extreme Ownership, and it's a book by Jocko Willink, who's a retired Navy SEAL. He discusses leading, how if you're going to be a good leader, you have to really be bought into what you're leading, and you also have to be able to lead up and down the chain of command. You need to be able to take criticism from other people, which is not one of the characteristics of a prideful person, and discipline equals freedom. These two things you'd think wouldn't be related, they are. Use these leadership principles. I hope this was helpful.